Shabbat Shalom. Usually, the last three Torah portions that we read, including today, Parashat Eimor, meaning Acharei Mot, Kedoshim, Eimor, are seen in the Jewish tradition as a continuous, right? They are looked upon by the rabbis as a sequence of three haftarot that kind of complement one another. And as a matter of fact, if you've ever studied Bible with somebody who's not Jewish, I remember when I studied with my friends who are ministers or pastors, thank you. It's actually super interesting because they know the chapters, they know the verses. I know the name of the Torah portions, right? I can tell you where it's in the middle, at the end, or at the beginning of the Torah portion, but I cannot tell you exactly which verse, which number, which chapter it is at, what I'm looking for. And it's interesting because these three Torah portions, Acharei Mot, Kedoshim, Eimor, are like a point of reference for the ethical Jewish conscience. Throughout our time on this earth, ever since we became a people, these three Torah portions that are in the heart of the book of Leviticus, which were meant really for the priests, for the Kohanim, have served as a compass for the Jewish people. Our code of holiness is contained in these three Torah portions. It began last week. We read the two of them, Acharei Mot and Kedoshim. In Acharei Mot, we have this strange ritual of Azazel, right? The two goats where the Kohen, the priest, actually prays on their head, and one of them is sent out to die, Azazel. And we do not know what Azazel means. It could be a wilderness demon. It could be a cliff. We have no idea. It could be an angel. But the one thing that we're sure of is that this goat that was sent away with all the sins of the people, carrying all the sins of the people, which is a very complicated ritual, by the way, giving all your sins to an animal is not something that is theologically progressive, right? And we still do that with tashlich, and we still do that with the chickens in kaporot, right? But the one thing about Azazel is that while the other goat was slaughtered in the altar by the priest, this goat just went away. Nobody saw it die. We don't know what happened to it. And I really believe it's a metaphor in the Torah to letting us know that even though we can cast our sins away, even though we can send away our transgressions, even though we want to disassociate with them, they don't die. They stay around. They may go to the wilderness. They may fall off a cliff, but they don't disappear. So on Yom Kippur, when we have this magical notion that everything is forgiven, it may be, but you still have to live with the consequences of what you did. Whether it was insulting a friend, whether it was stealing something, or something even worse than that. You ask for forgiveness, you go up to your friend, you go up to God and say, I'm sorry, but the consequences remain. And that's something very profound in our tradition. That is something that really informs the DNA of who we are as a people. Then you go into this whole other realm of holiness, right? First, you have the holiness that comes from understanding that everything you do has consequences. That you cannot one day just do whatever you're doing and put on a white robe, cover your head with a tallis, and you become holy. Okay? It takes a lot of work. And if you saw what I wrote about the Pope, I'm a big fan, actually, of this one. But seriously, the robes, the pomp and the circumstance, that doesn't make you holy. What makes you holy are your actions. What you do for others, not what you say, but ultimately what you do. And then we enter the realm of Kedoshim, the heart of the code of holiness. Be'afta lirecha kamocha. You should love your fellow like you love yourself. How can we do that? It's actually one of the most impossible and difficult things to do in life. I'm sure most of you here saw The Fiddler on the Roof. And there's an incredible scene Do you love me? Do I what? Right? Everybody knows that saying. It's the best saying ever, right? Sometimes I want to wake up in the morning and go, do you love me? Right? Liz just wants to hit me with a pillow, maybe even press. You know where this came from? Sholom Aleichem didn't invent this. There's a Hasidic story about a Hasidic rabbi that sees two Russian peasants super drunk in a pub. And one says to the other, do you love me? And the other one says, of course I love you. And he says, no, do you really, really love me? He says, I super love you. He says, if you love me so much, do you know where my pain is? Do you know what afflicts me? That's where the fiddler on the roof got it from this Hasidic legend. And the lesson is that we can't really love another person if we don't understand what afflicts them, what their pain is. If we have no empathy, no matter what we say, we can't love. Love is 80% about empathy. And that's an important lesson to remember. So then we come to Parashat Emor, with the priest, with the Kohanim, with a really difficult rule to understand at the beginning of the Torah portion that is supposed to inspire also holiness. God says to Moses, Emor el Kohanim, talk to the priests, only to the priests, not to all of Israel. This is not like Vadaber Adonai Moshe Emor, not talk to the entire people, just talk to Israel, to the Kohanim. And tell them that they cannot defile themselves by coming in touch with death. And if you know something about Judaism, you know that death is the most heavy source of ritual contamination that exists. And so the Kohanim were precluded from touching or being near a dead body because then they couldn't perform the sacrifices in the temple. So, in modern days, people who descend from the Kohanim, they don't enter the cemetery. And following what our Torah portion says, they only go to the cemetery when a close blood relative dies. What does this have to do with holiness? And here's the explanation of the rabbis. We have spent centuries trying to differentiate ourselves from others. Many of these rituals that you see, many of these laws that you see, are not because we believe that death was something magical or non-magical, or we had a superstition. But we saw the world around us where people actually worship the dead. Look, I come from a country where there's 2 days a year, where if you watch that movie Coco, that's exactly what the whole country becomes. I mean, seriously, it's exactly like that. So when we talk about worshiping the dead and building shrines and turning them into deities, I mean, one thing is to love the people that were here before us, to revere our ancestors. But we didn't want our priests to fall down that slippery slope of beatifying other deities. By the way, many of the sexual restrictions that come in Parashat Kedoshim come from the same source. There were things that pagans did that Jews were not meant to be doing, and we wanted to really differentiate ourselves from other people. We have spent a lifetime separating, self-separating. Sometimes they impose it on us. Sometimes we do it by ourselves. But we do it not because we think we're better. We do it not because we think we're more holy, because we're not. We simply do it for one reason. And this is at the most primal level. We don't want to become like them. For centuries, we struggled not to become like them. And what does that mean? It's a very difficult thing to understand. It's very heavy, by the way. And again, not theologically progressive, but let me explain. This week, we got back Edan Alexander, one of our hostages. And by the way, if you watched the moments where he was reunited with his family, if you watch them embrace and kiss and love and cry together, that is holiness. Never for a second did you see any of them say, I'm going to go back and kill all of those lousy terrorists that did this to me. Never for a second did you see Edan engage in talking about revenge. Nor have you ever seen one single one of these hostages that came back talk about retribution. That's incredible. Because if you or I would have gone through what they have been going through, I don't know if we could handle it. Edan Alexander was bound and handcuffed in a cage with a hood over his face for weeks at a time, surviving on very little food, listening to insults, getting beaten up all the time, because remember, he was taken with an army uniform on him. And now that he's back, the only thing he wants is to get back to his life. There's a beautiful verse in our Haftorah. V'tami yoru bein kodesh lechol u'bein tameh letahor. My people will be able to distinguish between holy and profane, between pure and impure. The images from last week actually mean that we know the difference. And by the way, I really think that we are a people that finds holiness through endurance. Because even when people who we thought were our friends are turning against us now, even when we see people say, oh my God, people in Gaza have nothing to eat, and everybody forgets what happened in that day of October 7th. It will take 1 minute to end what's happening in Gaza, and that's for these murderous beasts to let the hostages go free. And this is the one thing we have to remember. It will be very simple. And it brings me back to what Golda Meir said, which makes us holy, which is, this will only end when they love their children more than they hate us. And that's the bottom line. And these are all these sources of codes of holiness. We struggle not to become like them. It began with pagan rituals in antiquity, but today it extends to moral and ethical behavior. I'm going to tell you something that really moved me. Not because he's here and it's his bar mitzvah, but a couple of weeks ago, DJ and I decided to go see Alex swim all of those laps for the hostages that were sponsored for him to swim. And at the beginning, we never thought he was going to raise the amount of money he did, but he did. And when we watched him swim, I was feeling the pain. I mean, seriously. Like, I don't think I could complete 1 lap. Think about our children and think about their children. While our children swim laps in a pool with their parents and the rabbi and the cantor watching, supporting, these people teach their children to tear up posters and cover their faces and burn things down and smash windows. That is what holiness means. That no matter how far we're pushed inside our kishkes to descend to that level, we never do it. And we swim all the laps. Because in that painful silence, in that pool, is where glory and triumph ultimately develop. Tens of thousands of reservists have been called back again. We are not even close to the end of this. And we can qualify it, who's wrong, who's right, should they be going? The bottom line is, we cannot live as a people with these murderous beasts on the other side of the border. We can't. And when we stomach what we have to do and what has to be done, it is important that our children remain resilient also in how their hearts understand what's happening in the world. And that's why I'm so proud of Alex. I'm proud of all of our B'nai Mitzvah. Each one of our mitzvah projects is unique and amazing. But it takes tremendous understanding to turn anger and frustration and discouragement that comes from knowing there's no end to this, to raising what we need to help our men and women that are going in there a little bit more. Thank you for listening. I hope that we all aspire to holiness. There was holiness in that pool, by the way. And it's funny, right? Because I kept looking at the picture of Alex holding the trophy that circulated the internet and made it through Facebook and all over the world. And one of my friends said to me, "Who's that naked kid with the trophy in your Facebook page?" And I explained that he actually gave a donation, right? I was looking at the Pope with the robes and the incense and the thousands of people. And here you had Alex. To me, that was real holiness. Without the gear, without the smoke, but with all the heart. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach.